If you can't afford to live in New York City on 140,000 a year, move. No, I don't want to move. My family's here. I have a job here. Why the fuck should I have to move?
What's up, y'all? Derek Peterson here. I'm your host of the Before You Speak podcast. Welcome back. I am a father of 4, husband, dog dad of 2, and real estate agent, slowly becoming podcaster. And this is my co-host, Elwyn Hutter.
Hey, Derek, how you doing? My name is Elwyn. I am also married here in Austin. Couple of girls, couple of cats. Used to have dogs. Made the switch a couple of years ago. I have no comments on it.
It's kind of an old people thing.
Yep. Have a bunch of different careers in my background. Lawyer. I own a gym now. I worked for my dad in a small family business. Studied economics in undergrad. So, I figure I'm just on my current 5-year career, and then I'll probably switch to a new one in a few years, and I have no idea what that'll be.
Yeah, I may be in the career changing realm in the next few years too, if real estate doesn't take a hard turn at some point. So we'll see. Let's
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for you.
Fingers crossed that the Trump economy is actually going to boom like they've been claiming it's going to boom for a very long time. So
they're shoveling that shit hard.
Just wait. It's going to happen. Just wait. It's what I keep hearing. It's going to be epic. So, well, let's jump into the news for today. I'll let you start. We wanted to talk a little bit about obviously what's going on in the with Venezuela and the strikes in the Caribbean. I know Pete Hegseth is in some water, which also, by the way, South Park has been on point with this again. So I still think that they are running the best news organization in the country right now.
Well, they might have the easiest job, because it's like, this one's pretty clear. These guys are murderers, right? They committed murder, by every law, by every treaty that we've ever signed to that exists. If you blow up a boat, okay, that's probably a war crime. But if you're watching the feed and there's 2 guys hanging onto that boat and you go and kill them, that's definitely a war crime. That shit is murder. That is a war crime. And to call that out, it's got to be as easy as calling out Epstein and pedophilia, because it's that straightforward. But what's really interesting to me is, not just the like, oh shit, our Secretary of Defense is an open war criminal. But I feel like finally now more Republican elected officials in particular are starting to be like, wait, I guess we have to ask some questions about this. This seems really bad. And it's amazing that this is what it's taken to get this far. I guess Trump could shoot someone in Fifth Avenue and get away with it, but not in the middle of the Caribbean. Maybe this is the one that he doesn't quite get away with.
Well, it just speaks to the gross negligence of hiring, of the Trump administration hiring qualified people to do the jobs. Like, this very much feels like almost everything else that's gone on thus far, where you just bulldoze your way through and do whatever you want until you can't. And ironically enough, this is kind of what it felt like when I lived and worked in LA. Like, I worked around a bunch of celebrities, and once you get to a point in your celebrity and fame that you feel like you're far above everybody else, like, the word no doesn't really feel like it applies to you. And so people do some of the worst crap ever, just thinking that, like, oh, laws and regular things shouldn't apply to me. And oftentimes they can squeeze their way out of it until they do something that is so bad that you're like, you can't skirt that. Like,
that's like precisely where my brain has been on this, where for years, for like his whole Trump's whole first term, certainly January 6th, and now his entire second term, the question has been, where's the line? Like, what is too much? What will cause people to break free of the spell and say, no, this is too much. We can't abide by this, because this isn't the first time he's broken the law.
Yeah.
It's just, and every time prior that he's been allowed to break the law, we let him happen. So of course the line just moves and moves and moves and moves, and it never gets crossed. maybe we're seeing that murdering people in the Caribbean, in the most shameless way possible. Where you blew up their boat, they happen to survive that, and they're hanging on to the edge of the boat, and you blow them up again, right? There's literally that you can't make a defense argument. They're
Yeah.
they're still a risk to us. They're in the middle of fucking Caribbean Sea, hanging onto a boat that you just blew up, right? Like maybe this is the one where now some Republican elected officials start to say, no, this is a bridge too far. We need to haul some people in front of Congress, and maybe some voters start to be like, oh shit, no, murderous war criminals are bad for us.
I mean, we'll see. They're going to claim that the guy was like, happened to manage to keep his gun on him while the ship was being blown up and then was still shooting at us. I mean, they have
I,
video of all of it, right? So they can't, their lies can only go so far unless they inflate it to a point, but nothing surprises me at this
they'll
point
they'll
with
claim humanitarian. It was a humanitarian execution. They didn't want them to drown, be eaten by sharks. And then the fucking evangelical Christian right will be like, yes,
it was
that's
the
it.
right thing to do.
That was the right thing to do.
Jesus would have wanted those guys dead.
Yeah, what would Jesus do? He would have done that.
He would have killed them. Yeah, it's interesting to see. And then the claims that they're doing this all for the sake of keeping drugs out of the US while simultaneously pardoning one of the biggest drug regime, crimes in history, a guy that, basically was just allowing every cartel to operate freely through his country. That's the irony of all of this is just not beyond.
Did you listen to the Necessary Conversation podcast
I
from this
saw
week?
I saw the mom start to break a little bit in some of those clips, which was like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't breaking. It was just like, yeah, I can't really explain that, but it doesn't sound good.
Yeah, but I mean, like even that, even that is like, whoa, wait a
Yeah,
second.
it was like, whoa,
You're not even going to try to explain this. You're just like, no, this doesn't make any sense. Like, wow, oh my god.
that's progress right there. Any
Yeah.
progress with MAGA. They'll. I also wanted to touch briefly on, I've been following a bunch of. I follow economics closely right now because of my job and my career. It all plays a part in it, and kind of understanding the moving parts. And our conversation today is going to feed into this on inflation and affordability. But all these claims coming out about record Black Friday sales, which was interesting because you know, record sales, yes, but the actual dynamics of what were happening was that more money was spent, but less goods were purchased, and more. I think there was an insane increase in the amount of buy now, pay later. So Klarna and the other companies that are coming up right now with the buy now, pay later were used at record volumes this time. So this has been feeding into kind of my narrative around the economy, is that I felt like it was either going to be one, this Christmas season that kind of started to break people, which I think that is actually going to be the case still. I think when these payments start coming due in January and February next year, we're going to see unless there's some real economic progress on, jobs and inflation and, coming down and with prices, affordability with prices. I think we're going to see things hit the fan. But the interesting thing to me in all of this is, we look at the stock market right now, and a lot of economists are saying the stock market's basically being held up by 10 companies that are all heavily invested in AI. And I think the one winner of Black Friday was statistically, so they said the stuff I was reading was more money was spent on less items, but the use of AI direct to consumers right products was up 800%. So 9x from last year. And if you were taken to a website because of AI, you were 38% more likely to purchase that item. So AI is actually honing in on what is valuable to us, like specific user needs, kind of predicting their wants a little bit, which is interesting. So I don't know if, probably a different conversation for another time in regards to the ethical awareness of AI and what it's doing, but the effectiveness of AI is clear that it's that some of that is working. So that could bolster, the AI stocks for a little while longer before we see a huge adjustment on that. The fact that there was some notable progress in data even just on the user side. So we'll see how it all starts to pan out over the few months. But I hate the fact that we use the stock market as a litmus test for the financial health of our country. I don't think it actually works that way, but I think one of the reasons why the regime that's currently in place still has such a long leash is because the stock market hasn't fully tanked since they've been in office.
Well, no doubt we're going to get into that. We can circle back to that in a little bit. There's a couple things like I didn't read about the Black Friday sales. I saw a couple of headlines, but so I'm going in cold to what you just said, and there's a couple of interesting things there. One, I feel like if a lot of people are financing it on the buy now, pay later, then you're absolutely right. Do they pay later?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're seeing across other sections of the economy, first time missed payments on car loans are going up. People are late on their electric bills. Electric shutoffs for Con Edison in New York are like 10x higher than they were over some period a year ago. And that means that people aren't paying. And we have been trained to be a consumer society, right? There's a bargain that we make in this country uh, where we're not going to get a lot of things. We're not going to get healthcare. We're not going to get universal pre-K. We're not going to get a lot of things, but we're going to get fucking cheap TVs, right? We're going to
Yeah.
get cheap headphones. So I wonder if that's kind of the last thing that we're holding on to. It's like, oh man, this has been a tough year. I'm really tired, and I'm going to put this on buy now, pay later. The AI thing is interesting, and we should probably like do an AI episode because I have thoughts about AI, and I will acknowledge the effectiveness of AI in that regard and counter it with saying if AI is actually useful to us as individuals, to people, AI should be telling us what we shouldn't buy, what we shouldn't spend. AI should be like, yeah, great. Here's your budget. Here's what you've got. Here's your income for this year. Here's what you have. Here's what you can spend on your holiday gifts instead of pushing you into, buying a TV online and instead of paying $400 now, you pay $100 a month for the next 4 months. So I'm not stupid. I know why companies would want that to happen, obviously, and I know that companies are spending the money on AI. But it just seems the whole a massive problem with AI to me is the lack of any breaks, any protections at all on the just breakneck speed with which we run into an AI economy. So interesting that it worked. I would suspect it should work.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Well, considering the amount invested in the fact that it's essentially holding up our economy at the moment, you're damn right it should work for something. At least to predict some shopping habits. Like,
yeah,
we have this. This is hinged on changing the world at the moment based on the amount of investment in AI. So, yeah, it should be able to. We should be at the point, considering the investment, that it can predict some shopping habits for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, in
Lisa
my
wants
opinion, it should have
pajamas.
already. Yeah, I was going to say, in
Sorry,
my opinion, it should have already cured cancer. So,
yeah.
but
Lisa wants pajamas for as one of her Hanukkah gifts. So I've clicked on an Instagram deal. Click here, get 30% off, whatever. And I know this happened in the past, but never to this extent. I immediately got like 10 other companies. Every second reel I watch is a pajama company, which again, I know that's going to happen, but it's more so this year than ever before. And AI is not going to save the world by directing me to different pajama companies.
you're correct, and it's not even going to help your wallet or anything else.
No, because
It's
they're not cheap pajamas.
no, it's just going to convince you to buy something nicer and more expensive. Really.
I've bought zero pajamas thus far. I'm pissed off at AI.
It's all AI's. It's all AI's fault.
That's
We
right.
can we can blame it all on AI moving forward. Until we just don't want AI to hear that, because I want to be on its
Too
good
late.
side when it takes over the world. Like, no, no, no. I was a supporter
Yeah.
all along, I swear. So, all right. Well, let's jump into our main discussion today. I'm actually going to let you I'm going to ask this question, and then I want to kind of let you run for a second. Technically, what is inflation in layman's terms? And what is the importance of inflation? And we can even, if you want to loop in, wage growth and some other things in there, feel free.
Yeah. So the simplest, most reductive definition of too much inflation that I've heard is too much inflation occurs when you have too much money chasing too few goods. Right. So if you think about that, if you have something that used to cost a dollar and everybody had a dollar for that good, the good would cost a dollar. But now all of a sudden, if half the people have $1.50 allocated for that good, the price of that good is going to rise. And that, in its simplest terms, is inflation. Inflation, you don't really want inflation of zero. Inflation and wage growth should kind of go hand in hand, where as you get a raise, or not as you get a raise, but as uh, time passes and money becomes the value of money changes, the value of goods change alongside it. So it's consistent. So that bread costs what bread always costs relative to the amount of money that people are making on average. A good example of this would be like on the wage growth side. You hear a lot of stats about how in the 50s and 60s, the average CEO made like 3x what the worker made, and now they're making 300x what the worker made, right? There's too much money chasing too few goods being the CEO here. And you start to see this sort of breakdown of a bunch of things happen. There's a couple of metrics that we use to track inflation. So when you hear inflation is 3.1% this month, they're talking about year over year. So they're talking about compared to last year, a bucket of goods costs 3.1% more than it did the year before.
And typically, just to jump in here real quick, that typically when we refer to that, we're referring to, are you going to get into core CPI a little bit here and explain what that is? Because I think that's also important, because, the volatility of, food and gas isn't necessarily calculated into inflation, since those prices change rapidly and regularly.
Yep. And that's exactly right. So the number that they're talking about almost always is core CPI. You'll see numbers, excluding farms and things like that, and seasonal labor, stuff like that, which can affect inflation. But yeah, food and energy, if you just think about, what can cause oil prices to spike? A war in the Middle East. That has nothing to do. That doesn't shine a window on our economy here. So core CPI is this sort of bucket of consumer goods, excluding food and energy. I'm looking around the desk, pens, mugs, water bottles, these sorts of things. How much do they cost year over year in a given month? Inflation in the 2% is usually pretty solid. Nobody gets too fired up about it. Inflation is absolutely something that the Fed Reserve looks at when deciding to lower or raise interest rates. I know that's a lot of people looking at the numbers that came out this week are saying, well, this means that the Fed is now going to definitely lower the rates a quarter of a point. Uh, because if you lower, the way it works with that is if the Fed lowers interest rates, what they're doing is they're making it cheaper for banks, and they're lowering borrowing costs. So if it's cheaper to borrow money, right, then you can put more money into the system. That's inflationary. If you go back to that definition, right? Because now in the too much money chase, or how much money is chasing how much goods, you've added more money, but you haven't increased the goods yet. So lowering interest rates is generally inflationary. Raising them is generally something that's done when inflation gets out of hand. And that's why we have interest rates where they are now, because of the inflation during the pandemic. So that's kind of like a quick, my economics degree from 25 years ago, kicking back in, brushed it off this week.
So how do you feel about the current state of inflation and a lot of the rhetoric that we have coming out of the White House? Because my biggest frustration about this topic is really trying to match what's going on with my family and my household with what I'm being told, right? And so we have like two things happening simultaneously, which is like hearing like everything's fine, everybody's going to be all good. And then the reality of my business this year is down over 50% from what it was last year, and last year was down about 20ish% from the year before. So that coupled with like the cost of everything getting more expensive, and we throw tariffs in here too, because part of me is like, okay, just non-political talk about tariffs. If you're adding 10 to 20% to the cost of something and then expecting the companies to absorb the majority of that cost, they may for a short period of time, but ultimately they are going to eventually look at their margins. And when especially if it's a publicly traded company, right? Because they have to answer to shareholders. So they're going to come out, and ultimately the decision that's going to get made by any CEO is that the majority of these costs are going to get passed to the consumer incrementally, in hopes that they don't push the consumer out, but also gets them used to a new price for the same product that's typically outpacing our normal inflation. And we can get into the affordability topic afterwards, but I was curious like what your thoughts are on the current state of inflation in the US and the impacts of tariffs.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because my take on what's going on in inflation right now is that the importance of inflation as we've understood it is waning quickly, and it should. That goods might have increased 3% year over year means very, very little if you can't afford your car payment, or if rent is 60% of your budget, or if your health insurance is going to go up by 40%. We're not talking anymore than about whether or not a widget costs 3% more. And that's a really interesting shift that I think is resonating fairly quickly through the political discourse, especially. I think it's why Mamdani won. I
Yeah.
think it's why Trump won. And what's really fascinating about it being why Trump won is I think Trump won because Biden spent the last 2 years of his presidency, having press conferences and talking about charts showing that inflation was going down, and, the economy was the strongest one in the world post COVID and everything was great. And Trump got up and said, "Hey, do you feel like everything's great?" And everyone's like, "No." And they were like, "Well, he's showing you all the shit telling you that you should feel like it's great. And like, you don't feel like it's great. So vote for me. Don't vote for him."
Yeah.
And now Trump is making the same mistake. All his people are making the same mistake where they're out there. I mean, he yesterday or 2 days before, he was like, affordability, this new word, it's a con job, right? And they're talking about how inflation is good and it's going to get better, and all of these things. And I just think it used to matter and it doesn't anymore. And that's not a good thing because it means that we're talking about much, much, much bigger structural problems in the economy that just are untethered now from whether the rate of inflation is accurate or within zero point 0.4 points or something.
No, I think you nailed it on the head right there, though, because, inflation is a moot point if you can't afford your lifestyle, or can't afford to live. Tamara and I were just talking about this because we just took our kids to the dentist for the end of the year checkup, and Ellis has two cavities. To fill two cavities, and this is with very good dental insurance, it's going to cost me $811 to fill two cavities. Um, the that directly takes away from other things that we can do in our life now. Like that's because economic circumstances and things have happened where money is already tight. You start to get into just normal little things. So like, yeah, has the cost of getting a cavity filled gone up over the years? I want to say the last one I had done was probably 10, 15 years ago, and I think it cost me $200 to have it filled. So it's whatever the prices are on that, on how it's significantly gone up. I'm sure it has, but it doesn't matter, if I'm being honest, how much it's gone up. It's, can we afford it or not? Like, do we actually have the disposable income? And, we're going to have to tap into emergency funds and things like that to pay for dentist work right now, which is crazy for us. And I think the affordability conversation is a really critical one because, if you work regular jobs with hourly wages, you see a substantial percentage increase to anything that you regularly buy feels like a gut punch. You literally just watched your dollars walk out the door. Like your disposable income, the thing that you like, the money that you use to go to the movies or go to a show every like once a month, that's gone now. Just because your insurance company just decided to charge you an extra 150 a month because just, yeah, because
Yep.
like, we can.
Yeah, I think that it's people are starting to figure out that affordability and inflation do not mean the same thing. And in a lot of cases, like the fact that a cavity went up $600 in 10 years, that's not inflation.
Yeah.
Right. That's an affordability. That is, it doesn't matter what the rate of inflation for dental work is. We've passed the point now where people care because we've reached the point where it's like, can I do this? Is this affordable? And that then becomes the entire discussion. And I think that people are starting to wake up to it. The Democrats fell asleep on it in the last electoral cycle during Biden's term. The Republicans used it, but didn't believe in it, and that's becoming clear. And now that it's coming around again, where there's some portion of the Democratic machine that is starting to get it, but do they really understand? Because everything you just said is true, and that is even a almost a privileged position where you can choose to not go to the movies during a
Yeah.
month, where your choice is not, do I pay rent or do I pay for my medical bills?
Yeah.
Uh, that that is an affordability crisis, and I think we've been. I'll go back a little bit to when I first started working as an attorney, because we can talk about like public benefits and some politics down the road about this. My first job was with legal services, and one of my roles there was technically it was in family law, but I worked a lot of sort of public benefit type cases also. And what I learned, and I absolutely did not know this until I was exposed in this job to non-Northern Westchester, well-off middle class people, was that there is an incentive at some point to not work, right? Things become so expensive that wages don't cover it anymore. And now you have the choice of, the only choice becomes to not work and rely on the public fisc. Okay. So that then leads through politics, welfare queens, all these buzzwords that come out with, just people sucking off the tit of the system and all this stuff. And that's not usually what it is. It's an affordability problem. And only now are we seeing that affordability problem reach so deep and so widely into the American population that we have to be talking about it. It's the only conversation.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it feels like, right? It feels like these moments where you have to throw your hands up in the air just because you've been hit again and again and again. And the feel like people telling other people that they just, and granted, there's going to be a handful of people that live off the system because they can. That's life. But I would say the majority of people would, if they could get jobs that paid the wages that were at or beyond living standards so they could do a little bit more, they would do it. But you're
Yep.
right, if when you get to a point where you are in the red and working really hard still keeps you in the red, you're like, why in God's name am I continuing to do this?
Yep. Do you want to do the math? You want to do some math?
Let's do it.
So, because I think it's important for people to do this kind of top of the head, back of the napkin math that we're about to do, because I think people they just don't get how much it costs to live in an area like Austin, in most areas of the United States, right?
Agreed.
So in Austin, I think the average starting salary, entry level first year salary is, I think, like $84,000 a year, which is very high. It's one of the highest in the country, right? We have University of Texas here. We have a booming, or what was once booming, tech
Tech industry.
industry, right? There's a lot of favorable business conditions in Austin. So 84,000 a year, that's 7,000 a month. Okay. And that's all pre-tax money. Well, average rent in Austin for a one bedroom apartment is something like $2,700 to $3,000 a month. Okay, so now your 7,000 is down to, let's say, 4,500. Let's say you get a roommate, right, and you split it. So now it's 1,500 a month. Your 7,000 is down to 5,500. Okay, your food bills living in Austin are going to be $800 a month for groceries, or chipping away at that. You have a cell phone plan, an internet plan, a cable plan. That's another few $100s. You have a car. Okay. You have to have a car to live in Austin. There's no public transportation. Add that to the mix. We're now at another like $1,000. Right. So,
Minimum. That's,
right.
you're talking, the average car payment right now is $700 a month. Car insurance on that is going to be run you minimum, $200 to $300 a month, more than likely more. So then you include gas and any, additional money that goes into your car. Yeah, you're well over $1,000 a month on a car.
Yeah. So we're at 1,500 because you have a roommate on rent. Let's say you're at $1,200 in automotive related expenses, $2,700. You're at $800 for food, but we haven't really gone out yet. So we're at $3,500. We haven't talked about insurance, health insurance yet. Okay. We haven't talked about any sort of quality of life
Yeah.
type initiatives.
If you have a dog, if you know, any additional student loan debt, most likely they're
That
covering
Sorry, I
additional
forgot it's
student loan debt.
student loan debt,
Yeah.
right? So let's say student loans are $700 a month, right? Already in my head, we're down to like $1,500 a month of income that's non-accounted for. But by the way, I haven't accounted for tax in that 7,000, right? Your starting salary is 84,000. 7,000 a month. That's not your take home.
And you have no viable write-offs if you're a W-2 employee at a company, so you're going to pay the full taxes on that 84,000 cuz you don't have any, dependents.
Right.
So, yeah.
Now, the story that I'm telling you with this math is not, nobody's crying hearing that. Okay.
Yeah.
But let's change some stuff. Let's say we're no longer talking about somebody who is able to get an entry level job in Austin. Let's say we're talking about somebody who went to a trade school or who didn't finish college. And now what are they making? Are they making 36,000, 40,000? Right. And now we start to do the math on rent. And maybe we're not living in Austin, so rent is cheaper, but the national rent for average for a two-bedroom apartment is $1,800. Right. Food costs haven't changed. You whittle away at that, let's say $3,500 a month for this second person almost immediately.
Yep.
Almost immediately. And that is, like you said, unmarried, no kids. We're going to assume that the company is paying their health insurance, but that's a ridiculous assumption because below a certain level, the company you work for is not. If you're a mechanic, if you are a plumber, if you're working in the trades, there's an excellent chance you're paying your own health insurance.
Yep.
And if we then say this guy who's making $3,500 a month is married with two kids,
There's no way.
the other person has to work, right?
Yeah.
The
There's no.
math fails immediately because now you're paying $2,000 a month for health insurance,
Yep.
right? And then maybe you're paying 1,000 for rent. You're already down to $500 left over. The other person has to work.
Yep.
But what if the kids are 2 and 4 years old? Now you have to add daycare into this question. People don't think about this with the actual math that actual Americans have to pay. And for whatever reason, the citizens of the poorer states in this country are not the ones raising the outcry. It's the people in New York City that are raising the outcry. So the numbers are higher, and everybody gets to discount them because how can you tell me that 140,000 a year is enough for you to want to raise a family? And it's not in New York City.
Yeah.
So this issue of affordability of how much does healthcare cost, how much does childcare cost, how much does rent cost, is untethered from inflation, and people are starting to realize it, but we're not there yet, and we better get there quickly.
Yeah, I did the math. We have 4 kids. We're a family of 6 with 2 dogs. Our baseline year over year, basically expenses, this is with us not doing any extracurriculars, but just basically feeding our family, health insurance, cars, like covering all of our bases on that. Yeah, it's just over 120,000 a year. So, you were not that far. What was the study that was done? The guy that just came out and said that the real
Yeah,
poverty
Michael
line,
Green.
Michael Green, yeah, because I know that that's gained some traction. But anytime something like that starts making its way across multiple platforms and is getting discussed in on podcasts and on the news, it's because there's some truth to it. People are like, yeah, I feel that. And our family would fall right into that category where it's like, yeah, this year we're that's about what we're going to bring in after you deduct business expenses, and we're hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, and that guy's article, it's really interesting. The article, what you said is spot on, right? It drew attention because it made people start to think a little bit. And perhaps it gives voice to the people who are already in the situation that he's talking about, right? Where they need some voice in the media, in academia, in the people who are talking about that article, who would have read it. But most of those people are already missing the point. The article's been out for like a week, and there's an argument over the methodology, and there's an argument, over what should the definition of poverty be. That's not the
Yeah.
point. That's not the point he was making. And, he backtracked a little bit and said, well, maybe I could have done this differently, this differently. We should be digging in and saying, that's not the point, right? My point is that it is unaffordable. The federal poverty guideline, as we know it today, why is this important? Because this is what public benefits are based on:
Yeah.
Medicaid, SNAP, Section 8 housing, Head Start. Okay, they are all tied to the federal poverty line. The federal poverty line they started tracking this and coming up with a number for it in like 1963. And it was mostly based, like a key component to it was food prices in 1963. And in 1963, food prices were something like, I'm going to get this wrong, but it doesn't matter, something like 20% of a household's budget. We're 62 years later. Food prices are now generally thought to be somewhere between like 5%, 3 to 5% of a household's budget. But that hasn't changed. So now, who cares? The federal poverty guideline for a family of 4 now in 2025. Can you take a guess? Did you look it up?
I didn't look it up. No.
So I want you to take a guess. It's an interesting experiment, right? When we
Uh,
think of the word poverty,
yeah.
family of 4, what's the annual income at which you're in poverty?
Anything under 50,000 for sure. I mean, I'm being liberal with that, meaning like, I think actually anything under 70,000 is probably more accurate, but I would say if I had to guess, I'd probably guess 50.
$32,000
God, that's
is the
unbelievable.
federal poverty guideline for a family of 4. Some benefits, I
What, in
think
Oklahoma?
this is a national number.
Yeah,
It
it's
does
like
not change.
this
Yep.
only works in Idaho.
Yeah, it doesn't change based on where you are. There's no like scaling by zip code. So in New York City or in Yonkers, where I used to work, it was the same as it is in rural Idaho. And the benefits are the same. So if you're at SNAP benefits, food stamps, basically, you can't get them if your family income is more than 130%. For a family of 4, that's $42,000. Again,
Unbelievable.
It should, we shouldn't need to say anything else. Anybody that ever listens to this should be like, no, that's ridiculous. A family of
Yeah.
four cannot live on $42,000 a year. They need help paying for their food.
You
They
can barely cover rent on that.
Right,
Barely.
for a two-bedroom apartment that's
Yeah.
both kids sleeping in one room, right,
Yes.
and both parents sleeping in another room. National average is $1,800, right, which is $21,000 a year. So
Yeah.
you're
Over half your
already
income
at
is just your
right.
rent. Yeah.
And then we're not talking about things like insurance, right? So you start to see right away. It's like it doesn't matter if we're defining the word poverty right. Yes, we need to redefine it. And yes, we absolutely need to change the federal poverty line. But what his article pointed out was like, no, these like joke things that you see about how people make a certain amount of money and they have all these expenses and they're never getting by. And people are like, no, that's ridiculous. You should buy, buy cheaper food. No, fuck off. That's not the answer. Buy cheaper food is not the answer. The
Yeah.
answer is we have an affordability problem in this country. Housing and insurance and childcare have skyrocketed so much that it's no longer affordable to buy food. If you're looking at that and you're deciding that food is the problem, you're looking at it wrong.
Yep.
So that's what I think his article pointed out. And that's the discussion should be just what he wrote about. Nothing
Yeah.
more, nothing less, because what he wrote about is really, really, really important.
I was curious, have you thought at all about what actually changes the affordability crisis? Like what things would you like to see change that could actually make an impact for Americans daily?
Well, you're talking to a lefty, so I'll give you three guesses what's coming. Universal health care, universal childcare. Housing is a little bit more of a free market. We need to build more affordable housing and let the market take care of itself. I thought Kamala Harris's $25,000 credit was okay, fine. I'm not sure why that wouldn't just be added to the cost of the house, but
That would have just that I didn't think that was an ultimately a real solution. I applauded her effort for trying to put something out that was viable, but really you want to make housable affording, just stop allowing investment firms and
yeah.
large corporations to buy residential housing. That's
But
good. That's the fastest way to make things affordable if you want to go down that path.
the biggest two to me in terms of policies that are proven effective, okay, and that's really important. Universal health care is proven to be effective in every way. We are the only developed country that does not have some sort of universal government sponsored healthcare program. And we are also near the bottom of every healthcare metric. Our healthcare system does not work. Universal government backed healthcare systems do work. It is that simple. There's no debate otherwise. The
Yeah.
facts are too clear. Universal pre-K. They expanded pre-K under Bill de Blasio in New York, and it was an incredible success. Places that have universal pre-K, it pays for itself. The kids are smarter down the line. The families are better off. The families can make more money. It's all net good. It's all
Yep.
net good. And, you know, when is it socialism? That scary word? Who cares? Who gives a shit?
I agree with you 1,000%. Healthcare, universal healthcare and childcare are the two fastest ways to make a direct impact on everyone in our country. Universal healthcare being probably the priority. If you take healthcare costs off the table for Americans, at least a majority of them, you will see you would see a huge change in everybody's lifestyle and impact. But I think the problem for me runs deeper because I think it's actually probably the reason the healthcare and insurance companies have become so corrupt is that, capitalism hasn't been effective without guardrails. Like when you allow companies to get so large that it's so easy to buy up your competition and then pay off everybody that's going to try to stop you from buying up your competition. This is the conundrum we're in. We have the option to choose between, four basic insurance companies, and all of them happen to just tell you the same thing every time you try to go and get insurance, and then you flop back and forth between, a few of them to try to get a few $100 off every year. And then as soon as a new viable insurance company starts to come through the ranks and, gain traction and have a, great customer experience, they get purchased by one of the big ones and rolled in. So we've effectively killed competition in most industries in America, and allowed it to happen. And so all of these people out here right now, to me, that are preaching, against socialism and fighting all of this stuff, like, take a very, like, I believe in general the concept of capitalism, but there's something that drives human beings far more, and that's called greed. And greed is a thing, one of the seven, deadly sins or whatever, for a reason, because it's prevalent in all of us. And when somebody gets accustomed to a certain lifestyle, or you get into I saw this when I lived in LA often, like, it, I'll give the analogy, like, it's like, I don't compare myself to a bodybuilder because I'm not even close. But like, I'll compare myself to another, like, big guy that's probably a little bit fitter than me. Like, and this happens in all major circles. When billionaires get into dick swinging contests, they're throwing around, $200 million yachts as their, the means for them, the justification for them doing the things that they do to steamroll over their customers and people, because they're in a different stratosphere. Their priorities are completely different than what everybody else's is. And you, it's a very human thing, just on a different scale. And so, in my opinion, right now, what we're seeing, and this push towards some of these socialist ideas, I can't fight it, because we have failed miserably at putting guardrails on capitalism. And the corruption is so deep, and the consequences are nil. We see people get pardoned. We see Wall Street constantly getting a pass. You see, white collar crimes. Oddly enough, we call them white collar crimes as well. Like, they just get overlooked and hardly punished. And meanwhile, they're extorting millions and billions of dollars from the American people, all the way across. And so, that, I think, my frustration when we talk about all of this is, yeah, like, there is inflation impacts, you know, the economy in the world, but greed seems to be the most nefarious driver in all of this, because it seems to be the thing that is forcing us into these situations, which is why historically revolts aren't. If there was a civil war, I'd be surprised if it was a right against the left. I think at some point it becomes clear that it's the top versus the bottom.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff in there. Going back, see if I can remember my economics. In the most pure sense, the most theoretical sense, capitalism is a marketplace in which there are no barriers to entry, and the market sets the price, and profits are zero. Okay, where there is no corporate profit, because if I want to start a business, and the barrier to entry is zero, and I see that you have a business and you have $10 worth of profit, I might go in and lower the price of the good and make $9 profit. And you're going to go in and
Yeah.
make 8, and then, we're just going to price it down to the bottom until we wind up with zero. Now that's pure theory. Okay, what we've taken that to mean, and what it should be taken to mean, I think, is that the free market is a very, very powerful way to set and regulate prices, and it does work, and it does create innovation. uh it is why we have 60 why 60-inch TVs cost $300, but when I got a 50-inch TV 15 years ago, it cost like $1,200. Right, so there are benefits to it, but on balance, what you're getting at is exactly right. We're so far away from that sort of capitalist dream that, yeah, guess what? The idea that certain big things are paid for by the government or subsidized by the government starts to look really, really, really good, because I want to buy beef for dinner. Uh, and insurance is another thing entirely. Like there should be no that we have a for-profit insurance system in this country is completely insane if you think about what insurance is meant to be. We pay premiums and then we get our claims covered when we have them. And the actuarial tables say if we need to cover, Elwyn's annual physical, we need to collect $1 from 10,000 people, right? And now we can cover 10,000 annual physicals. Except what happens is they say, well, we need to pay everybody that works for us and we want to make a lot of money. So let's pay fewer claims and let's jack up the prices. And now you have a system without guardrails where capitalism has completely failed because it's in the wrong place.
Hmm.
Capitalism for selling eggs is great. Capitalism for selling insurance is terrible. Capitalism for selling police services and fire services are terrible, and that's why we don't do it. Capitalism for teachers is terrible. It's why we don't do it. We're used to this stuff, and it
Yeah.
works. So, that inclination, that corruption and greed are undermining any meaning at all to capitalism, I think is completely right. And I think actually after the pandemic is the perfect example. I believe without question. And you said this earlier in this conversation, companies figured out what they could charge for a product. They learned that it was higher than they thought. People kept buying it. Why would they ever lower the price? And they're not going to. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to make the chocolate bar smaller. So now your chocolate bar that used to cost $1.65 costs $2, and it used to be, this long, and now it's this long. Uh,
Mhm.
but you're still paying the same $2. So I think you're all right. This affordability conversation is at the heart of American politics and American society right now. I think people are starting to wake up to it, but they don't fully understand it. They're just shackled by old notions of work harder. You had Best and Don saying, "Move. If you can't afford to live in New York City on 140,000 a year, move." No, I don't want to move. My family's here.
Y-
I have a job here. Why the fuck should I have to move?
Exactly. And I think that's where I wanted to kind of take our conversation next is, what role does politics, what role should have politics have? Because this is the crux of it all, right? Is we hire we vote for elected officials to essentially, who follow our ideals, and oftentimes it's the other side's ideals that get win over. And right now we're currently dealing with the other side's ideals in office. And the politics, I mean, all of these stuff, it's so closely tied together you can't separate it. But from the political sphere, what what do we need to be looking for in the people that we vote for? Like what kind of conversations should we be seeking out to see real change happen in this arena?
There's a difference between policy and politics. So the policy has to start moving towards making things more affordable. And if we're not willing to have hard conversations about subsidizing healthcare and subsidizing childcare and serious permitting reform in the real estate industry to build more affordable housing quickly and regulating STRs and investors buying housing. If we're not ready to have these inherently anti-capitalist conversations, then we're not getting anywhere. Right. So that's on
Yeah.
the policy side. We have to start having these conversations. On the politics side, the group that wins, and it seems unlikely, but maybe it's not a Republican or a Democrat. Maybe it's some new third party. The group that wins is going to be the group that honestly and with a full understanding of the problem embraces the affordability problem and solutions to it. There is no doubt it's why Mamdani won. Period. People want free buses. They don't know if they want free grocery stores, but they're sure willing to try, right? Because they need it, not because they're lazy and they want free shit, right? They want free universal pre-K because they need it, because they can't survive without it. So,
Yeah.
the Democrats, I think, they're starting to, oh, wait, but I'm curious about whether or not it'll be lip service, just before they try to squash that progressive wing of the party. The Republicans, I think they don't get it. And even if they did get it, it's too antithetical to their core beliefs for them to ever do anything about it. Obamacare was a Mitt Romney, Massachusetts plan. That
Yeah.
that was blueprint. The blueprint of that was what Mitt Romney did with healthcare in Massachusetts, and we know how the Republican Party feels about that. I- Any sort of government assistance, it's just antithetical to them, and there's a million reasons why. So on the
I don't
politics,
understand why. I mean, I understand why Obamacare and, you know, look, if Obamacare to a Republican sounds as bad as these Trump accounts right now, which I think actually might be a good thing, like what I think the concept of what they're trying to do with some of these Trump accounts, which we can talk about that later, but the initial reaction to Obamacare because his name was on it is like visceral. And I know it's the Affordable Care Act, but because it got coined Obamacare, people are gonna naturally push back just because of your political views. But my biggest frustration with all of this is that there is a solution. Like, there is a solution, and the solution just requires companies that have spent years, and decades of time, you know, benefiting of on the dollars of American people and giving very little back in return, with insurance companies. We're required to carry insurance. Like, if I buy a car and I get a loan, I'm required to have insurance. If I get a house and I have a mortgage, I'm required to pay insurance companies. Like, this in and of itself is a huge oversight in what's going in what's happening in our country. There is a absolutely a world in which healthcare and insurance is run by the government, but and in a way that is effective and cost beneficial for everyone, and just allowing these companies to dissolve. Like, I know people are heavily invested, but we've spent so much money and time bailing companies out in the past and not allowing companies fail on the backs of, like, oh, we want these jobs for American people. Meanwhile, we know the corruption behind all of that. And I'm done with it. Like, I want to hear people in politics talk about this stuff more strongly now than ever before. I want somebody to come in and say, we are going to find a way to reform healthcare and make it universal. We are going to find a way to reform insurance and not allow these companies to deny your insurance and overcharge you constantly. We are going to regulate these things, or we're going to do away with it all and start again. Because and in the larger scope of things, outside of if you run or own an insurance company or work high up in one, this benefits everybody. Like, there's not a single soul that's outside of these industries that would push back on this, unless you give it a political name and force it down somebody's throat. And then they'll find a way to push back on it. But it literally just helps everyone, and I don't understand why we can't get there.
the candidate and party that fully adopts that message and finds a way to work with the other politicians, or finds a coalition of enough politicians that also adopt that message, they'll be in power for 50 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and the crazy thing is that there are literally every other developed country has that type of system in one way or another. We can go to any one of 32 countries and say what works, what doesn't work. Where could this be better? It's the north to Canada, right? We say, like, oh, you can't get a doctor. Bullshit. Yes, you can. Just
Yeah.
by and large, really, really like their healthcare system. Okay, by and large, it's really, really good. But we
And most
just
people don't use it that often. Like, the majority of people, like, like I go to the doctor only if I freaking have to. And,
Mhm.
like, and it's the last, there's basic stuff that we need them for. And then outside of that, like, I'd even be fine as if universal healthcare covered basic, you know, uh, inpatient, visits where you or outpatient visits where you go see your doctor, check in, and then if you need supplemental insurance for like any kind of additional things like catastrophic surgeries or things like that, because look, I don't want to take away or de-incentivize a highly skilled surgeon that can save lives because he spent his entire life focusing on this niche surgery that only happens in a very small percentage of the population, but he's one of the few people that can do it because he spent his entire life studying it. I'm all for that human being incredibly wealthy and making a lot of money off of the fact that he can save lives for people that can afford to have their lives saved. Like, I'm not in argument against that, but I think when we talk about basic healthcare for the majority of healthy Americans that need just basic stuff like blood pressure medication or, whatever things are like regularly insulin if you're a type 1 diabetic, things like that, where it's like these things should be all included and covered in basic costs. If we want to talk about accidents and other things outside of that, you know, maybe there's room for supplemental insurance policies or different things to cover outside stuff, but man, it just should not be what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, we could probably circle back into a whole episode because I say the surgeon is about 78th on the list of people I care about in this thing, right? Like we want a society. What is this country based on, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's in our Declaration of Independence. It is the moral code that underpins the foundation of our country. And yet we've allowed ourselves to be swallowed up by a healthcare system that does not prioritize or promote life, that undermines liberty. Because if you have a job with health insurance, you better think long and hard before you leave that job, right? If you get
Yep.
sick, you can't pay for anything. The second job I had at legal services was helping people find bankruptcy attorneys. And the most common reason they needed bankruptcy attorneys was because someone in their family got sick or had a catastrophic injury, and they either had to choose pay for your house or pay your medical bills. In the
Yep.
United States in the 2000s, right? That's not liberty. And certainly it's not the pursuit of happiness, right? So we're so fucking backwards on how we treat the health of our citizenry that there are no concerns
Yeah.
that a surgeon has beyond, like, yes, should they be compensated? Sure. Do they need to make millions? Nope. Someone else is going to do it. That's the free market, right? If you
Fair
say
point.
surgeons are going to be paid $500,000, people will become surgeons.
Yeah.
You know.
Agreed. Like I said, in a full system overhaul, look,
Yep.
anybody that is talking honestly about this stuff, it- I'm in. I'm all in. And I know that there would be a painful season while figuring this stuff out, but I don't think it needs to be as complicated as it has been. And I just genuinely want to see people not hurting. Like, I don't, we live in such a beautiful country. And even with all of the bullshit going on and people fighting over politics, like the fact that we can sit here and argue about politics on Facebook and Instagram is still, a beautiful thing compared to what you can do in a lot of the rest of the world, and without the fact that we can do it freely, at least currently, without fear of, repercussion, that's we live in a really beautiful place, and like I would love to see change that impacted people radically. And I feel like I've yet to see that in our country in the positive at any time in my life. I've yet to see a revolution for the good.
Yep. Yeah. The
So
most radical thing that's happened in the last 100 years: Social Security and Medicare,
yeah,
government backing. of elderly folks so that they can live well in retirement.
And thank
I
God for
think
them. They're effective
thank
programs. Like
that's
it's the
right.
reason my
And
mom will be able to retire.
yep. And until we and that's why I think this affordability conversation is so important. And I really, really, really hope it doesn't go away, because the more people talk about it, the more minds will open to the basic inequity of the system as it exists now. And there's a lot of pressure to me on young people, but they're the ones that are going to drive the change.
Yeah.
So I hope they do, because, like you said, we are blessed. We did win the cosmic lottery being born in this country in this time. And
Yeah.
it's a shame to see those benefits become rarer and rarer to the people who live here.
Well, if guys like us keep talking about it, hopefully some young people will eventually listen.
That's right.
Probably not. Probably not. All right. Well, somebody definitely needs to listen right now, and they need to stop talking as well, because we're about to get into our shut the fuck up for this week. What do we got going on, Elwyn? Who are we
So
mad
I'm
at
not,
today?
yeah, most of the progressive left democracies in the world, I guess. For today's shut the fuck up, and just again, shut the fuck up is not. It's not me feeling that someone's opinions are invalid or don't have a place or shouldn't be listened to. It is more that somebody should put a little more thought into what they're talking about, and maybe see things from some different sides and come up with a more nuanced, better opinion. Uh, which doesn't have to be mine, by the way, but I guess I need to say that.
That's what.
Uh,
That's why we're here.
yeah. So today it was announced that every year there's this like Eurovision singing contest. I think it's like America's Got Talent, but different countries send representatives, and there's a contest to see who wins. And it covers European countries, but also the Middle East. So today, two countries said that they would boycott Eurovision because Israel, as they were last year and the year before, will be included in the contest this year. And obviously, that's because of objections to what's going on in Gaza. Shut the fuck up. People who are saying that Israel should be boycotted for stuff like this. First of all, because it's not the singer's fault. Okay. The person who's hurt here is not the person at fault. You have a problem, and I have major problems with Netanyahu's government also. He was going to be the shut the fuck up about his pardon before this shit happened today. But all the people who look at this and treat Israel differently than they treat other countries that are committing atrocities. And I'm willing to say that Israel is committing atrocities, but they are not the only country. Okay. There are dozens of countries that have shit human rights records that compete in international arenas all the time without objection. Sudan has a, a a massacre going on where you can literally see the blood from all the killings from fucking space. You can see the blood in the soil from how many people they're killing there. Okay. Iran, Egypt, miserable on human rights, miserable on dissenting opinions. China, miserable on human rights, miserable on dissenting opinions. So if your outrage is only at Israel, if you only look at Israel and say you should be boycotted, right? We're boycotting because Israel's here, not because Egypt has a shot or Iran has a shot or China has a shot. Then I have only one conclusion left, which is ultimately your objection is that, yeah, you're pissed about Israel's doing what they're doing in Gaza, but you're really pissed that they're Jewish. Can't think of another I can't think of another point. And if you really feel that strongly that you're going to not send your singer to compete in a singing contest because you hate what Israel's doing in Gaza, then you need to shut the fuck up and think about whether that anger and outrage is being equally applied around the world. Whether you're going to Spain, are you going to boycott the World Cup? You got the favorite team for next year's World Cup. You're going to boycott the fucking World Cup because Egypt might be in there or Iran has a chance to be in there? If not, why are you boycotting because of Israel? And the only conclusion that I can come up with that carries any weight is you're pissed off that they're Jewish. And that's a problem. And you need to shut the fuck up and come up with a different reason, or shut the fuck up and recognize the inherent anti Semitic stance that you're taking there. It's this double standard that's existed since October 7th that people just gloss over. And as a Jewish person in America who has come a long way around on a bunch of things, the one thing that I have not come around on at all is that how Israel is treated so differently, and how they're viewed so differently and held to a higher standard in almost everything than every other country in the world, is at its core anti-Semitism. It is at its core about Israel being a Jewish state. So Spain and whatever other country is going to boycott, shut the fuck up. Send your fucking singer. Let them sing. Let them win. Let them lose. The Israeli person won last year, and it was not a favorable environment for them. And they had to be barricaded inside their hotel because there were fucking mobs of protesters outside their hotel. Okay?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So shut the fuck up with your fucking latent anti-Semitism and make a political argument before you do something like this, because there is none. And I know there is none because it's not evenly applied. Your outrage is not war. Your outrage is not killing people. Your outrage is seemingly a Jewish state doing it. And I have nothing but disdain for that.
If we need to get you a little microphone, so at the end of this you can just drop it.
Oh, drop it? I thought we were going like virtual fist bump. We
do virtual fist bump too. I gotta find my camera. No, I think that's what I'm gonna get you for Christmas, is just a mini microphone. So when you're done with these, you can just drop it.
I just fucked up the whole recording by dropping my AirPods too.
That's all right. We're done. That's a good spot to end it. So signing off, and I think next week we're gonna talk about something else heavy, like freedom of speech or something like that.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
We'll see y'all next week.
It'll be fun.